All right, Dr. Ross, we will start off with some taxes, and school funding questions. First question: are primary homes taxed for bonds?
Thank you. So I wanted to do some clarification with this question. With one of the tax facts that I think are so important for us to understand is that 4% properties or primary homes are not taxed for school operations. So again, primary homes for or 4% properties are not taxed for school operations. This was a change. Prior to 2006, then they were. But with the passage of Act 388 that relieved the primary homes for taxing or operational tax for school operations. I will put in here though your cars, RVs, and rental properties and businesses, they are taxed for school operations.
Has the district considered charging impact fees for new construction or lots?
To be able to charge an impact fee on new construction and developments would have to involve the county. The district does not have the ability to levy that impact fee upon a developer without that authority.
If the bond referendum does not pass, do we have a plan? Will it go back to the priorities listed by the architecture firm, starting with the number twos, threes, then fours, or will priorities be completely reassessed?
What's interesting to understand, is important to understand, is what funding we have available if the bond referendum does not pass. So without the referendum and we keep the millage at the same 69 and a half mills, you can see how much money is available to us. So if you look at our priorities here in descending order, so the highest priority is the security upgrades to the lowest, which is if funds remain the covered practice fields. You see how much money is available to us, but understand that's 100% of the 8% money. Imagine a credit card with a $52 million max on it. You would be bringing that credit card up to 100% utilization rate to realize all 10 million. So it'll be up to the board to decide what's the best we can do while keeping some capacity for construction.
What is your current total amount and or facility condition indexed for deferred maintenance?
Can you repeat that question again?
What is your current total amount or facility condition index for deferred maintenance?
I think it's important to look at our facilities conditions report on October 23rd, just to get that point of time of what NPS shared with us. I think what's important for understanding is when we look at all of the information that went into that NPS report, that was August of 2023. We add 584 incidences per month since then. So we haven't fully captured the entire point in time of where we are. Everything is operating in estimates. So when you look at $182 million of deferred maintenance costs, that's just at one point of time. I think the longer we go, the more this will tally up.
Okay, how do members of the community set up a meeting to either talk to you or our CFO to go over the millage rate or the borrowing, etc.?
What we can do is if you can email myself or our CFO, Heather Tucker, and we're going to set up a meeting where we can go over this. I think a lot of the information it does require, for instance, I'll go here and show our amortization schedule. This shows you how we pay off the bonds over time without raising the debt service millage rate. Without the bond, how we would pay off that debt without going over the millage rate. going over these datas and these worksheets, you can see the numbers behind it. And so we also have a finance plan that was put out on December the 11th. That's on our website as well. And you can look at the details there, but also schedule time with myself or Ms. Heather Tucker, and we can get the financial advisor to show you how we plan to amortize this debt over time.
Have there been any efforts to tax properties to help fund some of these initiatives?
So the School Bond Act is in place. I think it goes back to 1954 that allows us to tax properties to build buildings. And the School Bond Act, if you look at what it provides up to 8% of the total assessed value in order to address improving schools, equipping schools, repairing schools, and building schools. And that full amount is $52.7 million that we can use. We need 182 just in facility cost. And so that's why we're doing the referendum at 240 million. What's important to understand is that this can be paid off with our current levy for debt service. Over 400 million will require a tax rate increase.
And I think you this could have just answered this next question, but if you have $239 million of projects and we automatically issue the 53 million in bonds, don't you need 292 million?
So what's important to understand is your 8% money and your bond referendum money, in order to, once you are able to go over that, the voter gives you the ability to go over 8%. It is not a percentage of your total assessed value. It is now how much you will have out in order to pay off without increasing your debt service millage rate. So understand that if we look at, so let me go to this slide and show you, we are at one point going to issue $240 million, right? We're going to have 3 consecutive years of $80 million borrows. We can pay those off. If you borrow too much at one time, you will have to increase the tax rate in order to pay that off. So you cannot borrow it where you cannot pay it off at 69.5 mils. So that's why this plan exists. This plan allows us to borrow that, pay that off, keep the money that we have in 8% that's paying on projects like the Irmo High School renovation, keep those in play. So this is really what it looks like. We say 240, but it's $80 million a year.
Can you share more information on the debt service tax used to pay back these bonds? What is the impact of this tax to the residents if the referendum is approved, current versus the future?
All right. So let's talk about with the referendum. The referendum here would be issued in multiple series. You can see it here, 80 million for the first year, 80 million for the second year, and there would be another additional 80 million referendum that would be issued here. And those you can see paid out over time through this graph here. This shows us how we're paying off these different levels of referendum debt over time. What this line represents is how much revenue our millage rate will give us based on assessed value. That line grows at about 2% that we estimate. And so if we are under that line of between the revenue of which we pay off the interest and the principal, we're able to borrow in these increments over time, pay those off with our current tax levy. Now, without the referendum, you can see that we would not have any referendum. We would now be using only what's called 8% money, the 52. And this represents in millions how much we would be able to get each year to try to address the facilities. We would get 240 million eventually, but it would be out to 2039 when we would get that. The question is, would the project still cost 240 by the time we get to 2039? So we can borrow it and get to 240 in 3 years, or we can wait till 2039 to borrow it. But either way, our millage rate allows us to not raise with each option.
Okay. Are there other options to fundraise these funds if it's related to capital construction?
And so the question is, what pathways would we have to funding 182 million? You have to think about how much revenue and effort would be to generate a profit of $182 million. When you look at the needs that are within the district, each of these needs are pressing and they're growing over time. You see some of the issues that we have to improve within 2 years, and that was 2 years of 2023. So by 2025, have we raised? What could you do to raise enough money for even half of that? And so the only thing I can think of is you buy wholesale, sell retail, and we're not. That's not what a school district's energies are devoted to. PTOs have tried bake sales and selling candy and gift wrapping, but it does not generate the millions of dollars in time to make that. The School Bond Act, however, the School Bond Act does, and it gives communities the ability to address infrastructure needs, and that's what's important to understand, is that this is used for school infrastructure.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about our operations, I guess the different pockets of money that we're allowed to pay teachers and our expenses, utilities and all of that, and then what pays for our building improvements and that sort of thing, the different pots of money that we have to work with?
So let's look at the two pots here that we have. One is the general operating fund. Okay, this is what pays teachers. And again, there's two taxes that are in our community. The first tax is the operating tax or operating millage. A tax on property or real estate is called a mill. So we have an operating mill that is paid. And who pays that? 6% properties or businesses, cars and RVs and trailers. Those boats. I mean, those are the things that pay that pay operating. Now, how is that our revenue? It's important to understand that all of that operating accounts for 35% of our revenue. 64% of it is coming from the state. Now, the state is giving us money for our instructional program. So 88% of how we spend our money is to salaries and benefits for people. Again, I'll say that again. Of our operating money, $215 million last year, 88% of every dollar we receive goes right to people and their benefits. 7 cents for every dollar that we receive goes to utilities, paying for all of the electric and the gas and the water bill, and purchase services, substitutes and instructional programs, legal costs, and all of our purchase services that we have, cutting the grass. 4% goes to the supplies that we use in the classroom. So 4 cents out of every dollar that we receive from these three pots will go to supplies and materials. So that leaves about 1% from equipment. Air conditioners, do I buy a science lab, right? Do we buy, which we brought this out, do we buy security equipment? Do we buy band equipment? And these are the citizens. You got 1 cent for every for every dollar that comes in. So how do you fix your facilities if the majority of the money that you receive are going to people? You fix your facilities with the School Bond Act. It says you can borrow up to 50 or 8% of your total assessed value, which in our case is $52.7 million. If you want over that, if we wanted to borrow 53 million or 54 million, it would need a bond referendum. It's important to understand that the district looked at where would increasing taxes be. We would borrow so much that we could not amortize it over time, and would need more of a levy from the public, because the School Bond Act is serviced with a debt service tax. Operating on the general side, the second tax is a debt service tax. Debt service means is it's not the money to build the buildings. Understand this. The debt service tax is not the money to build the buildings. When you sell bonds, the revenue you get from the bonds, that's what repairs, replaces, construction, equips buildings. The debt service tax pays the debt on those bonds. The debt is the principal that you borrowed and the interest that is repaid for borrowing.
Is there an estimate of increased operating expenses that will be a result of these district enhancements being completed?
You know, what's interesting about a lot of the additions that we're asking is, I think people have to understand that not all programs have their own buildings today. A lot of programs are doubling up. And so if I was to look at our NPS report and see how at Irmo High School, there's 2 programs in Irmo High School right now. That at Piney Woods, there are 2 programs in there right now. That at Spring Hill High School, there's 2 programs in there now. Well, we're not expanding any of the programs. What we are doing is giving each of those programs a space to be that operates for them. So by building a new Dutch Fork Elementary School, you would think, oh, they're bringing on a new staff. No, we're moving that staff there and taking those programs that are doubled up in other buildings and putting them in the old Dutch Fork Elementary, so that we free up buildings that are doubled up for other usages. So I think it's important to understand that any operational increases would just gain from the operational increases that we have without a referendum. What we do benefit from is that the maintenance costs on band-aiding, putting band-aids on instead of fixing things, we would like to see efficiencies from having a more efficient system. So you have a car that gets 10 miles to the gallon, you can keep repairing it. Or if you get a car that goes, 35 miles to the gallon, you get more efficiencies there. So our costs of operating are really suppressed because of what we have to do with deferred maintenance.
Okay. If these funds are amortized over 20 years, yet the study only looked at facilities up to the next 10 years, what happens in years 11 through 20 when all the growth comes and we grow out of the facilities that are being built today and need more facilities? What are the expectations, I guess, asked another way? In year 10, what are the expectations for capacity in our schools?
Okay, so this is, I'll go to kind of the rezoning piece, because in our review of our data, I think it's important to look at where we currently have existing space. By making the move east, by moving where we have a lot of children to where we don't have a lot of children, we are increasing our capacity to handle future growth in the areas predicted to have the future growth. So our goal is really making this not for a 5-year viewpoint, but a 15-year viewpoint, instead of waiting until it is too late. The thing, it takes 2 years at lightning speed to get a building up and running. If we wait till, I feel like it's past needed, but if we continue to wait, then there's no way you can address the area which is Chapin, which is seen to have the highest increase if we don't make this move by moving students east where we don't have as high as capacity. This represents our utilization rates. We want to be at about 80%. And so by moving east, we can achieve that goal.
Okay, what overall program management methods are being considered to oversee the overall building program and allocation of funds? And will the referendum be binding to the projects/needs proposed currently and prior to the vote?
Very good. The bond referendum, according to our bond attorney, is to be spent on the items that we have in the question. And that's what we're going to the voters for. I think it's important for them to know that that's what we're binding to these projects here. These numbers represent the estimates at the time that we actually go out to bid these and to finish these projects. I think it's important to understand that we have to outsource the capacity to do all of this. We still have to run our existing buildings with our existing operations. So construction management companies help us with not only the projects, but the procurement of services, the permitting, the construction, all of those things, the phasing that needs to go on, and acts as a point person between us and those construction companies that are moving in. So we would be going with a construction management company. I'll be asking the board to hire one to help us move through these efficiently. And then lastly, I think it's important to have a community advisory for just a referendum. Members of the community who don't work for the district, who are not associated with us, but who want to be the oversight for these funds. It comes from the community. I think the community should have an oversight team where we report our progress on these matters. Nothing. If you renovated a kitchen, it does not go as you intended. And so we know that is going to happen as we start renovating. If this passes, we start renovating buildings, we're going to run into things that weren't expected. The only way to build trust is to share that with the community advisory, get their feedback, and then they can report as a committee their thoughts to the board of trustees.
How do you define individual houses as it relates to the comment that, quote, primary houses are not taxed for school operations? How are school operations paid if not through primary households?
Very good. So Act 388, it's important to understand, I think that was 2006, changed the law in terms of how operational taxes were. Previous to Act 388, you had a subdivision of primary homes, which are your 4% assessed properties. So you got to understand the difference. We go into the tax code, but you have 4%, which are typically your those are single family homes. Those are the ones that we kind of 30-year mortgage on, raise your children in. Those are your 4% assessed properties. And you have 10% assessed properties, 12. You have 6%, which are the businesses and rental properties, RVs. So all of those fall in different categories in which their rates are assessed and the taxes are assessed. But with Act 388 in 2006, that was removed from the primary primary home. So 4% do not pay for teachers. A subdivision comes in, 500 houses, all primary, none of them rental. They won't provide a single teacher, librarian, nurse. Those operations are now what we would come from the state.
Okay. Okay. Is there a place to see how much taxes will be increased for, say, a $200,000 valued house, and for how many years that bond-related amount would be paid? Is that anything that is available somewhere to look up?
What I will look up is, remember that this referendum, with or without, is the same tax rate. So whatever rate you are paying on that $200,000 assessed house is the same with or without the referendum.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Can we get clarification? Let's see. So if individuals pay for school taxes on personal property taxes that include vehicles, boats, etc., but rental property owners pay school taxes, which will directly funnel down to the parents and residents who rent homes versus owning, they will, the only people that seem to hold true for are the homeowners that qualify for legal residence. So I guess he's wondering, will people that rent their homes be impacted with an increase in their taxes?
So it would, let's make an assumption. If the person who rents pays the rent, the person who owns pays the 6%. So the owner is paying it. Now, would they pass that down in rent increases? You can make that argument. And then I think it's important to understand of all of those taxes of operation, that accounts for 35% of one pot of the funds that we receive.
Okay. All right. Now I think we have asked all of our taxes and school funding questions.